The rule that is always is there's going to be near scrapes, or they're going to be making scrapes. That no buck escapes that rule. There are different types of scrapes. They all have different types of roles, whether it's communities that get used year-round, primary scrapes, secondary scrapes. I've even got like what I call competition scrapes. And like I said, 85-90% of my deer have been in and around scrapes. I love it. It makes it easy for me.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
We're live, back for another podcast. Bill Thompson, Spartan Forge. Welcome back.
How you doing, Beau?
It's been a little while since we've been on a podcast together.
Has it?
Yeah.
I suppose the one with Lee last year. The last?
With who?
Lee and John at Johnny's cabin.
Yes, you're right. But me and you solo hasn't been since December of 2023.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yep.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, but I'm excited to get you on. I got to come down to your house and hang out with you and your beautiful family.
Right here at Casa de Thompson.
Casa de Thompson.
Yeah, that's the one.
And we did a semi-cold bath before coming in here.
A little bit. Semi is the best word. It was probably 45 degrees. But.
Well, yeah, it's your ice bathtub, but it wasn't cold enough. But it was super hot out, and we're recording here in the summertime. Now, this isn't coming out until October, but we're recording in the summertime. It's warm, muggy, and thought it'd be nice to record outside. Just need to cool down a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to keep me cool. Nobody wants me sweating here like Don DeLuise. That's a joke that you wouldn't get, but he's an old fat guy from the 80s.
I don't remember.
Someone needs to Google him, Dom DeLuise. He's always sweating like gravy.
Really?
That's how I feel right now. Not right now, before we cold bath.
Yeah, because when you came out, when you asked me, you're like, hey, are your cameras okay to record? And I was like, yeah, it's not that bad. But I looked at you, I was like, you're the one struggling.
Yeah.
So Bill, obviously I've had you on the podcast before, but we got quite a few new listeners and stuff on here. I kind of want to start with we talked about it at dinner, so that's why I thought this was a good conversation to start, of how you and I met.
Yeah. I mean, I think, correct me when I'm wrong, because I'll be wrong plenty during this podcast, especially because we had some, my wife made wonderful margaritas for our dinner here. So, but I'm good. But I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I got your phone number was it from John?
No, it was from Greg Litzinger.
That's right, from Greg.
Mm-hmm.
And I just cold called you while I was flying. I think I was leaving Montana at the time. And I think you've said you have a lot of new listeners. What I would encourage your listeners to do is go back and listen to some of your earliest ones with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I consider those a gold standard for podcasting about deer hunting and deer behavior. And maybe your dad didn't know how much this was going to explode at that time, so he's being a little more revealing than he probably would be now.
Yeah.
But the tactics and stuff, and at that time I was what was your first year of your podcast? What was your first?
2018.
Yeah, so I was in the throes of figuring out mountain deer at that time. I started mountain buck hunting in 2016.
2015 is what you told me earlier today.
2015 is when I moved out there.
Okay.
I saw no deer.
Okay.
My 2015, I would just, it's like when you're hunting out in the Midwest, you can basically get deer to show up wherever you need them to, because there's hedgerows and there's cuts and there's
more natural funnels.
Very natural funnels between fields where they're just restricted, like they have to travel here. So you can have a totally clean forest floor and have deer activity all day long. And so you don't really get a sense for what deer do when they're pressured. So when I started hunting in Western Maryland, which is where there are these large, vast, very similar to the Pennsylvania mountain areas, I would always pick like what I now call, and I don't know if someone else does this or not, maybe I coined the term, probably not, like the pretty woods. Like nice, open, looks
big
beautiful,
timber,
big
old
timber.
growth.
Yeah,
type
yeah.
stuff.
Like, you know, you look at it, you're just like, oh, this is beautiful. This looks, if I were a buck,
Yeah.
this is where I'd be, and I'd be dead. I sat those spots throughout 2015 and just saw spikes, doe. Maybe I'd see a doe 60 yards off who's just like trying to get by me, who obviously caught me, and I saw nothing. So I knew I had to recalibrate myself, and I was looking for, you know, pressured big woods, mountain type podcasts where I could listen and see how are guys. And I remember one of them that you did, besides your dad one, the ones with your dad, was one I think you did with Greg, where you guys were talking about, and I think the picture was like a buck hitting a scrape on like a trail in the mountains somewhere or something like that. I'll find the picture later and send it to you. And I said, okay, this guy obviously is hunting the same types of places that I'm in right now, where I know there are bucks because I have cameras and I see them at night. So they're here, but they're eluding me every time I sit in the woods. So I knew I had to recalibrate myself and kind of relearn hunting at that point. And I really got into your podcast with your dad, podcast with Johnny, with Greg, really for me were a gold standard when it came to understanding mountain buck behavior and kind of, you know, in pressured areas, how these deer are using terrain and you know, remaining elusive and because they're kicking my butt. So 2015 is when I kind of started, but I didn't, it's not really hunting when you're just sitting in open tree stands and just, this is pretty, you're not seeing a thing. And that's kind of how I spent that 2015 season. And then 2016, I knew I had to learn. I found your podcast. There are a couple of other ones. But really, there weren't podcasts that were going into techniques for, like, guys who are do-it-yourself on public where you're actually grinding and where you're actually... When I listened to yours, I was like, okay, this is a guy who's actually out in the same types of places that I am right now and not someone who's got, like, a 2,000-acre farm. Or
Was it because I was failing a lot?
Maybe.
It could have been.
There's a counterpoint there.
Yeah.
There was maybe some of that too, but you know, stuff with Greg, stuff with Johnny, stuff with your dad. And I've always been a scrape hunter, and hearing your dad talk about scrapes and then putting those techniques to practice when I was in the woods and then finally starting to get success. And you know, it's not a stretch to say, you know, I started scrape hunting in the Midwest and had relative success with it, and then got into it more 2016, and I think I told you earlier today, like 2017, 2018, 2019, I had spent so much time in the woods. I have a very addictive personality, so once I have something that seems like I can't figure it out and I start applying myself and I get results, I just become solely focused on those things. And that's what I did during those seasons, and I just learned so much over that, like, 4 or 5 year period about deer behavior, selecting, you know, where you're looking for, what you're looking for, because you really don't have unless you have somebody, you know, like your dad or someone else who's been there and done that and can show you these things, you're really hosed.
Yeah.
You just have no way to do it. And I, you know, after grinding and learning that, I really felt like I was getting into it around 2017, 2018. I was hitting my strides. And I would say for me, like, I was addicted to it at that point. Like, once I started to figure it out, my addictive personality kicked in. I was doing it all the time. And then I started having success. And I had a lot of success in North Dakota. So it was really, I had to eat some humble pie. like coming out to like mountain country.
Yeah, I was gonna preface that a little bit, and that is not saying like you were a new hunter in 2016. You had shot a lot of deer.
Yeah,
in the
Midwest.
In the Midwest.
Yeah, and again, it was heavily agricultural places.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing in Midwest was like, where are the good fields that are full of food, and then where's there, 4 or 5 different hedgerows that come together. Now I'm just going to sit in the middle of those, and if there's a scrape in there, then I'm even better. And that, in the Midwest, is a good enough heuristic. And there's nothing against Midwest hunters. I'm not saying that they've got it necessarily easy. All I'm saying is the areas where a deer will travel during the daylight hours are very confined.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas in the big woods, when you're looking at 20,000 acres of open hardwoods or open stands, and now you've got to make a decision about, okay, there's these 3 pockets of ground cover where a buck might feel relatively safe during the daylight hours, and here are where the does are. Now, if I were somebody who was trying to elude pressure, how would I navigate these 5-6 places? And that's really where I started to hit my stride and kind of just relearned this passion that I have for the woods and whitetails. Like, I'm an introvert by nature. I like, even, people hear it and they kind of think it's funny, but I can communicate, I can talk, I can have a good time, have a few beers, jaw jack, do all of that stuff. But when it comes down to like recharging or finding myself or centering or decompressing, it's in the woods alone, like getting in the woods alone. And while I'm in the woods alone, if I have a task, which the whitetail became the task, that was my pressure valve. At that time, it was for the military, where I had a ton of pressure in the military, as being, a mid to high level officer, deploying and going overseas and having a family and all of that stuff. The whitetail woods just became my pressure valve where I could let things off. And your podcasts, we're telling a long story, and I apologize to say this on every podcast I go, and I have no short answers. But your podcast is one of the first ones where I'm like, oh, this is a guy like me. Like, he's grinding. He's hitting large tracts of public and finding success. So there's probably something I can learn. And listening to those podcasts, I really fell in love with your way of looking at the woods, your enthusiasm. A lot of guys get, people talk about public, and I'm out here in the public, and, for a few years, there was almost like I'm better than the hunters who are on private or whatever, which really isn't the case. It's just a different style of hunting. And at that time, it was a fever pitch, I think. Like, the hunting public and those guys were really exploding because people, this was a place where anyone could go. And if you were willing to have patience and learn, you could enjoy relative success. And in your case, you were really, you and your dad, Johnny, guys like that were really knocking down big deer. So when I started the company, my goal was to build something that would enable people that were in the same situation that I was in 2015, 2016, 2017. And being engineer minded and being a military intelligence guy, I saw the whitetail woods like I see anything else, which is variable analysis, which is understanding what are all of the factors that I need to account for in order to be successful, whether it's historical wind, timber growth, logging operations, where the cuts are, what are the things that will constrain travel, and putting all of that together in a comprehensive way so that when I choose a spot, I've factored for as much as I could. And I found that the apps that were out there gave me like one piece of that. I was using a historical weather, like, it was an app, it wasn't even an app, as a website for pilots that was doing historical wind and wind patterns and that type of stuff. And then I was using AccuWeather, and I was using Weather Underground, and I was using Gaia and ArcGIS, and finding all of this like logging data and trying to put that all together. And that wasn't anywhere in one app to put that together. And I thought, if I could put all of this in one place, now I'm speaking to the same people that you were speaking to with your podcast at the time. So it made sense to me, the first couple of guys that I went after right away. And I had access. I had an advisor or a mentor who had started a few companies in the hunting industry. He had exited a company. He was the founder of the National Deer Alliance. He was kind of my mentor that I had just not cold called. I got introduced to him. I went to a church where there was a hunter's dinner, and there was a guy named Charlie Alsheimer who is a prolific whitetail photographer who is a fantastic man, like a man of the highest caliber. And I kind of told him this crazy idea that I had about Spartan Forge, and he just, it would have been no problem for him to be like, yeah, that's good, son. Like, go and do your thing, and I'll give you some advice. But he introduced me to people and got me in the industry, introduced me to some big people. Like one of the first guys he introduced me to was Bill Winke. And I had my first conversations with Bill Winke about whitetails and whitetail hunting in 2016, 2017.
Really?
Yeah, and it just was obvious. Bill's great, accomplished hunter, but he wasn't tackling the same types of terrain and places and pressured areas that I was interested in solving a problem for. And when I discovered your podcast, it was that you were doing exactly that, as I've probably said here for the fourth time. So you, Johnny, Greg, the Seek One guys, and the Seek One guys are different, but they were still trying to create access. You know what I'm saying? They were still trying to do it. They were still adopting a heuristic or like a method that anyone could do. Anyone can stop in front of a house and knock on a door. Anyone can go to a large tract of public. Anyone can look at maps and download offline data and look at things. And I felt like that was the majority of the hunting industry, or at least that was the segment of the hunting industry that I wanted to serve, because that was a segment that I was in where it was really hard for me to find data. So
yeah, and you could always do the best for the people that are in either similar situations as you or that you can relate to in a way that it makes it easy to solve their problem because it's your problem to be able to solve versus like casting a very wide net.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and also if you're building stuff that's really useful for a public land hunter, even if you own your own 2,000 acres, you're still going to be able to use that. So you were one of the first guys that I reached out to. So I got your number through Greg, and I knew you were working for another company at the time, but I also knew from listening to you that you were, a do-it-yourself guy who was hungry, motivated, and my rubric for the company was, I'm not going to just pay these guys as, hey, here's 10 grand or whatever people paid at the time. I have no idea. And now go and talk about my product. It was, no, here, I'm interested in the same problems that you are. Do you want to come along with me and do this together? And I almost guarantee you failure.
Well, no, and you actually started, so you called me, and it was funny because I think you left me a voicemail the first time I called you back, because I don't answer phone numbers typically that I don't recognize.
Yeah.
And I think you might have left me a voicemail, and I've received plenty of either voicemails or emails that were cold calls of like a product or something somebody wanted me to entertain, and 99.9% of them I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I don't really want a part of it. And for some reason,
or you just don't have the time to figure it all out.
Yeah,
it's not take me a half a year.
Yeah, it's not even that. It's just exactly what you said. It's not that I'm disinterested. It's just like there's so much fluff out there that I don't have the time to focus on. At that time, I was working my full-time job, doing the podcast, doing everything. I didn't have any spare time to focus on anything. But I don't remember what you said, but something you said even in the voicemail, and maybe I went back to Greg. I don't remember the specifics, but some reason I called you back and we talked on the phone. We talked on the phone for a while, and I can picture this exactly where I was standing. I was in my living room. I just bought my house that I live in today, and I'd bought it probably 4 or 5 months before that. And I was pacing back and forth walking around my living room back and forth talking to you on the phone. We talked for a while. I was like, man, like we had a really good conversation, and I felt like I related to you, and you're telling me about this crazy idea you had for AI deer prediction, and AI wasn't a thing then.
Yeah.
No one was talking about
No, not at all.
AI, and you're going through it and you're explaining the weather data, and I was a very big historical, and I still am, very big historical data kind of guy, and we related really well. And at that point, you weren't building a mapping app or anything. You were building deer prediction, and that's where you were like, hey, let me give you access, this login code to this website. It was only on the web, and I'd get on, and he's like, play around with it, cross-reference it with your trail camera data, like look at all this stuff. And there was some time that went in between that before we talked again. I was testing through things, and like I was seeing some strong correlations and these patterns and things. And you'd reach out a few times in between, and we talked, and I was like, man, this guy's onto something. And also, I highly respected Greg, and Greg recommended that I talk to you, which held a high regard to me of like, all right, Greg's not going to just, throw anybody there. And then you and I started talking. I remember one thing that you did, I think that was really important, was you're like, let me drive up to you and let me meet you in person. And let's talk about something. It was like, you came up and me, and we talked, and I was like, man, like this guy's he believes in his thing enough that he wants to come up and, drive, I think at that time, 5 or 6 hours.
6+
to come talk to me. And I was like, oh, that was really, kind of hit home at that point. But I remember that. And also I want to go back to something you said about you getting out and hunting alone in the headspace you get in. I was just talking to somebody literally a couple days ago, and we were talking about you, and not to blow your head up with ego or anything, but we were talking about your intelligence and everything, and then also like how busy you are and how many things you got going on, and you're all over the place. And I said, do you want to know who Bill is? I said, on November 3rd, get him at deer camp and spend when you get that chance to disconnect for a period of time and be there. I said, that's how you know who Bill is.
Yeah.
That's when you get to meet the real Bill, is when you get in that time, because it takes you a day or so, as it does for me when I leave working and I go, whether I'm flying into Alaska on a moose hunt, or I'm going on elk hunt, or I'm on a whitetail trip, and I'm even in my home state, but hunting the rut, to disconnect from the outside world and focus on that task, which is hunting, whatever that animal might be, in this case, whitetail deer, in the rut, being focused on it, you change into a different person.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that very heavily with you, and it's made me appreciate that much more.
It's such a pleasure. I've said it many times, and I think it gets lost on people because a lot of people don't leave the U.S. Like, I lived in Germany for a few years. I lived in Africa, and there's no, like, people, they don't even know what a rut is. There's red deer out there. There's tons of different types of elk and stags and all that stuff, and they have all the same mating seasons and all of that stuff. But they either can't own firearms, or they don't have, they by nobility can't own land. And it's something that's afforded to Americans, and it's very unique to our country. And to me, it's like I'm getting in the zone when I get to get out there and disconnect and just focus on a singular endeavor. I have such an appreciation for the pleasure of that, because it's just not available anywhere else in the world. Like, the U.S. is a very small place in comparison to like something like Russia or Western Europe or Asia, or where all of animals, not whitetails, but other animals. There are other places where whitetails are, and Norway and the western part of Europe. But we get to enjoy this, and we get to do it unfettered, and it's available to everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic standing in the world. Anyone can save $300, get a rifle, or get a bow, And in the U.S., we get these large tracts of vast land that's available to us where we can go out there and live like a king from another part of the world. And we get to solely focus on something where we get to let the world melt away for a week and focus solely on this one task. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's wonderful. And you're right. Like, it takes me a day or two. It's funny you say that because I've never heard anyone say that back to me, but I've thought that many times. It's like a zone that you get into where you're like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm focused on this. Everything that it was like the military and combat operations. You learn something about your enemy. You're putting the pattern of life together, the analysis, you're doing all that stuff, and now it's go time. And it's like, have you prepped enough? Have you learned enough? Have you thought enough? Are you disciplined enough in your trade and your task that you can be dropped into anywhere in the world and make something happen? And whitetails allow you to test yourself in that way. And I think one of the tragedies, and unfortunately it's happening in the U.S. these days, but it's prevalent in Europe, is men are not pushing themselves. We're not, and it's happening in the U.S. and it's sad, but people will go through their lives and never know how far they can push themselves. They'll never know their physical, spiritual, or mental limits. They've never, done it all with the chips down. They've never put themselves in a really tough situation. And I think it was Plato that said it, but it was something along the lines of, Plato, his name in Greek meant big shoulders. And he was a prolific wrestler, and he loved wrestling. And he one of his things he said was, a man doesn't really know another man until they've fought, until they've rolled, or they've really pushed each other and beat the crap out of each other. And you can have that same experience with nature, where you push yourself and you're like, no, I haven't seen a deer in 6 days. Like, I'm hunting this buck, or I haven't had success, but I'm going to believe myself and my tactics and my charge, and I'm going to commit. And then like day 8, you get it done, and you're just like, oh, it's like the best feeling in the world. And, my thing for young men especially is just like push yourself, like find out the limits of your body, find out the limits of your convictions,
your mind,
and like, can you beat the mental? Like, it's very easy to be on day 3 in a deer stand and be like, this isn't the right stand. It's like, you don't know if it's the right stand. It could be the right stand on day 5, and that day 5 will define your whole season.
And the thing is, even at this point in both of our hunting careers, if you want to call it that, we still don't know if it's the right stand to be in. But
that's the beauty of it.
When you put that prep in and you build that belief in it, you have to have that belief and that confidence. When you build that, which comes through experience and preparation, and you build that up, that you have to have that to be able to go through what you're talking about.
To it. Yeah. It's like starting a business in that, if someone had told me all of the mental and physical trials and tribulations and the cost of starting something like Spartan Forge, or like your podcast, or the multiple other endeavors that you're in, if someone were to give you that calculus before you did it, you'd be like, well, I'm not doing it.
I say it all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. But then when you do it and you commit to yourself and you believe in yourself, and we talked about it earlier today when we were at the range, that unfettered confidence in yourself and your craft, then you commit to a singular ideal, a singular goal, a singular endeavor. That it almost takes crazy confidence. It almost takes crazy like addictive belief in yourself. And then when you get it done, which you will, like if you do your homework, you understand the place. It's the same thing with business. If you commit and you act in the right way, and you tell yourself and others the truth while you're doing it, you'll have success. And your dad said it on a podcast, or no, your dad said it in your Mountain Joe film. He said, some of my best seasons are where I didn't kill. And all I did was learn. Which
was one season, by the way.
It's the only season?
Yeah.
Well, he said it like some of the best times are when I'm just learning.
Yeah. I think his actual quote was the best seasons you have are the ones that you learn from failure.
Yeah.
It's something along those lines, but 100%. Like anytime you go through something and you're not successful in whatever that is when you're able to turn and learn that. Like and you know, it's funny that you brought that up because I remember one year, 2 years ago, it was actually the same year as my dad that he didn't fill his buck tag in Pennsylvania. I didn't fill my buck tag in Pennsylvania. And I remember being like, man, I learned so much. But I felt like if I even said that out loud, that it was an excuse of like, oh, this was a rationalization. Like, but I learned something. But in reality, it really was.
You really do.
You really did, because I got to hunt from October through the middle to end of January and experience everything that went through it. Screwed up a hell of a lot of things and been through it. And but
then also it's like, are you just like are you a sunny day hunter? Like, are you just out there for the good times? Or are you out there to learn? Like, there's a saying I've heard in the military and I've heard in the Navy. I think the saying in the Navy is, you don't become a good boat captain in stable seas, like calm seas. Like, you'll never learn how to properly become a boatsman or a shipsman. You won't learn how to navigate the ocean in calm seas because it's easy. Anybody can shoot an azimuth and keep the boat on course. And it's the same with the military. From an army perspective, like, the best leaders are forged in war, like in the chaos and the down times when things are not going well. That's where the mettle of a man is tested. Mm-hmm. That's where you find out, do you love hunting, or are you here to just kill animals? Do you love being outdoors, or are you just here because you've got something to prove to yourself?
You just want to be recognized.
You want to be recognized, right? And being recognized isn't a bad, like, for hunters to start. I think it's most guys are like, I want to prove myself. Yeah, I can do this. That's fine. But you have to graduate to a level where you're now committed for the experience of just being in the woods. And like you talked about it with a mutual friend of ours the other day, like, I saw a fisher. I saw a wolf. Mm-hmm. I didn't see a deer, but it was like awesome. I just had the best time in the woods. And that's woodsmanship. It's just like, I would enjoy this if I never saw a deer, and I'd still do it. That's a level you should aspire for. Or I'm going to teach other people how to do it. You know, like Jesus said, I'm going to make fishers of men. It's not about what I can do. It's about what I can empower others to do. And, that's something that I think is very important for the future of the country and to keep this crazy experiment that we have going, where anybody with a few $100 or less, you can make your own primitive bow if you really want to, and go out in a flannel shirt from the thrift store, and you can sit on the ground behind a log. Like, you can spend almost nothing and still go out there and experience the same things that we're talking about. That's just not available to everybody else throughout the U.S. And those are the type of people I'm building this app for. That's why we have a free version of the app. That's why we put all of this work into this, is because it's more about successful. It has to be a successful business because we have to pay the bills. Yep. Right. But beyond that, the higher goal, or the goal that I think about more, is how do I push the culture of this forward and put it in a place where it's ready for the next generation.
How do you pass along those traditions? And at the time of recording this, I was at Nathan Killen's house the day before, and we talked about that a lot, of like, and Alan Altizer, while I was here, is like passing on that knowledge, that traditions, those things, so that future generations can experience what we've been able to experience through time. And you can't become complacent to that, because there's a good chance that does not happen, right. And it's important for us to do our part.
I think about it. I think about the app and what I've done with Spartan Forge kind of like a movie, in that you'll have these movies where they come out and they're not appreciating their time. Or a book, like, there's an author that I like to read. His name is Friedrich Nietzsche, or most people have heard of him. But while he was alive, he sold like 60 books. I think 60 or 100 books while he was alive. And we're talking about him today, a few hundred years later. and people look back at what he was doing, the experiment that he was running in his time, and we're talking about him today, so obviously he did something. Or you think about a movie like Fight Club was a failure in the movie theaters. Like no one went and watched Fight Club. They didn't know what it was about. It was a really weird idea. And, 20 years later, my daughter watches it and loves it, or somebody else watches it and loves it, or my son really liked the movie, or whomever, and we talk about it later. That, to me, I still define that as a victory. So if, like Spartan Forge, in a few years, we close down shop or whatever, if people look back at it and say, well, that guy was one of us, and he was trying to build something for us, and, he went up against private equity and large companies, and he fought his hardest, and he tried to build something that was for the betterment of people around him, and he's trying to push our culture forward and our American experiment forward, and it failed. But you know what? The guy shot for the moon, and he went for it, and we need more people like that. Success. I consider that a success. So I'm trying to play a longer game than just monetary benefit today, or, dominating the market today. I'd love to do those things, and I hope that's a natural output of what the experiment we're trying to run, because I believe in the customer, that the people that are like us, that are just that are out there grinding. I believe in those people, and there are a lot of them. But if it doesn't work out in that regard, and people just say, well, Bill was a good guy, and he went and, what the biggest competition that you can imagine, we're talking about him in the boardrooms, and how do we kill this guy, or how do we take him down? Because I know those conversations are happening.
Yep.
I get told by guys that I'm friends with who are like, I was just in a marketing meeting at Company X, and they were like, what are we going to do about Spartan Forge? Like, what do we do with them? That's a victory to me, because, the best stories are always the stories that are told where few stood against many and made it happen.
I'll never forget when I was, fast forwarding a little bit from the initial conversation we had to 7-8 months later, and you told me that you're going to build a map, which was going to conflict with a current partnership I had at the time.
Yeah.
That was at the time like my basically sole source of income that I was trying to eventually go full time in what I was doing.
Me to hear you say that.
It was.
I know.
And you're like, I'm going to build a map, and it's going to be better, and I need you along to do, whether you needed me or not. I don't believe you needed me, but
I needed you.
You're like, I need you along to help build this for the hunters that are out there, and for all of us, for the people that. For people like you, basically what you said, and you did a great sales pitch. So, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, all right, I'm trying to figure out how to leave my job that I don't love to do, which needs a paycheck, and then you're telling me to become a part of this company that has there's no like track record. I'm going on belief. Yeah. And for some reason, I know now, but like for some reason I believed in what you were telling me, and you weren't selling snake oil to me like this. This was something I wanted to be a part of it, of being able to build that and move forward. And I took that risk of like, all right, I'm going to jump on board with this crazy guy that's still currently in the Army.
Yeah.
and go ahead and do it. And it was just like, it was crazy at the time.
Yeah, I had a moment at the dinner table tonight, and oftentimes when I have these moments, I don't talk about it. Drew and I talk about this all the time, but I probably have 10 thoughts for everything that I express. Like that's a lot of times, crazy. Like it's insane. Like I'll think about 10 different things before I settle on what I'm actually going to say. Drew and I were at a TAC in, where was that? Maybe Utah? No, it's Texas. And some guy said something to me, like, I don't remember what it was, insulting. And I had this like joke I was going to say back to him that was just going to absolutely crush him. And I was like, no, I won't say that. I'm going to say something much more placid. And then fired off like a funny little joke. And then when Drew and I were walking away, I was like, what I wanted to say with this. And he's like, why didn't you say that? And I'm like, because I didn't want to ruin the guy's day. If there's anything I'm good at, it's ball busting. Yeah. And So at the dinner table tonight, I had the thought, I was like, Beau, it was like you, Garrett, Johnny were some of the first guys that I talked to where I said, look, like, I don't know who runs these other companies. I don't know what their culture is. I don't know what they care about or believe in. And I don't like putting money into places where I don't know where's it going to, who's the equity coming from, what's the goal of this private equity company. A lot of them have, my experience in the 6 or so years I've been in the hunting industry is a lot of people who own these really large companies are not particularly enthusiastic about our pastime, about firearms, about hunting, about getting out there and being alone and unafraid. They just see it costs
Business
this much.
opportunity,
Yeah, they just see it costs this, which is fine. Like that's a part of the American experience. It costs this much to get a customer in this company, and it costs this much for a product. So if it costs me $3 to pump into Meta to get $60, let's go. Like I want to invest in your company. So they do that. Mm-hmm. But on the background, they're like, well, we don't like the Second Amendment. We don't like unabashedly conservative or patriotic Americans. We don't care about the culture. We care about the bottom line. There's an element of business with that that's fine. But when you talk about something as precious as our pastime as hunters and our love for the outdoors and the solitude and the proving yourself and providing, the sense of completion and the sense of, this morning I made my daughters and my wife venison sausage and some eggs and potatoes. I killed this deer last year, went into the freezer, Gunner processed it for me, thank you Gunner, and made it delicious, and I get to feed my kids that, and they sit at the table and it's all smiles. That's the culture to me. That's the part that I love about this. That is really the when you distill it all down, that's really what it's all about for me, which is why like every season I kill 2 or 3 does before I'm even thinking about bucks. Like success for me is doe number 3. Freezer's full, and now I'm going for bucks. And like the buck part is like, that's the fun part. That's like, I get a winning season like the NFL, like, hey, we want a winning record this year. That's 3 does for me.
Yeah.
And now the playoffs and the Super Bowl, that's all cheddar. That's all the icing on the cake.
You're 9-7, before you even go into it.
Yeah, exactly. All I need is an AFC wild card spot, and then I'll be good to go. And so my kids doing that and having that food, I don't know who else in the hunting industry or private equity or whatever else, or when you do the research and then here's the founder of this private equity firm that owns hunting company X, and he's talking about how there's a school shooting, the Second Amendment needs to be thrown out the door. It's like, no, the cost of liberty is messy. Giving somebody ultimate freedom inevitably means they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. It inevitably means there's going to be car accidents. Like if you're going to have cars and mass transportation and Amazon delivering products all over the place, someone's going to die in a car accident. But unfettered freedom, the cost of that liberty is accidents and death and figuring things out. But if we have a Second Amendment where there can't be a gulag or people lining up in bread lines or, the Soviet famine during the 1920s or 1910s because there's an armed populace, that's very important to me. Mm-hmm. And so when I look into these I told you the other day, and I can go through my LinkedIn or I can go through my email and show you, usually once a week or once every 3 days, I get a private equity firm reaches out and says, we looked into your business. This is what we think we could do. We'd like to make you an offer and blah, 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 blah. And then I go on Twitter and here's the guy who leads the board for the private equity firm. And he's saying, the Second Amendment's outdated and we need to update this or X, Y, and Z. It's almost like 3/4 of the time these are the guys who are in charge of this. There's something that happens to people when they get very rich that they think that they've now figured out something else because you developed a product. Somehow now you have a profundity over how people should run their lives. And the two things couldn't be more disconnected.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you made a vacuum cleaner that's better than other vacuum cleaners. shut up about my life.
All right, that shark in there is pretty cool.
The shark is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But if he wants to invest in Spartan Forge and he's talking about how the Second Amendment's outdated.
Yeah, he wants to take away RARs, like that's not okay.
Yeah, or freedom of speech is a old thing, or the freedom of the press or whatever. It's like, no, I can't do that. And 3/4 of the time, that's exactly what I run into whenever I get into these companies or I start talking to people or whatever. It's like, hey, Bill, could you tone it down about like the Trump stuff? Or like, I saw this video you made with Beau where you were talking about a lot of things, a lot of stuff. Make deer camp great again. They didn't like that. They don't like that. I don't understand why. It's like, no, dude, it's funny. And Trump is the bulldog that you all hate. And I don't agree with everything Trump's doing, especially now. But I do love that he hates you and your system. Yeah. And that you don't like him.
And all aside, like, you should be able to have a sense of humor.
And have a good time.
And have a good time no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
I had a guy message me recently, and not to go down this rabbit hole, we won't, but like about when I was putting out some stuff on defending the public land side of things, and the guy was like, "You're the one who voted for this," and I went into like a whole discussion with him, and the guy started attacking me pretty hard, and he was someone that was, I would consider, I don't know if he's a fan. He commented on a lot of things. Probably 60% of them were positive. He had some negative things. That was fine. Yeah. That's fine. I can take criticism. But then, like, I started putting stuff out. There was ads running for Timber Ninja, and I was in them. And then he's writing on them, product is shit. Like, this is no good. Like, whatever. And he was not a customer. Like, I can see all the orders. Like, this guy's not a customer. Yeah. But he was mad because of the conversation that me and I, like, that we had. And it was just like, I can't take that kind of stuff.
I said it to you when we were on the range today. The enemy of perfect is good.
Yeah.
Or the enemy of good is perfect. I'm sorry. If you want to find the perfect politician, good luck to you.
Yeah. The enemy of good is great. Like, it's just like when you are. I think we all messed
good
up.
Or perfect. The enemy of good is perfect.
Yeah.
Like, if you want a perfect politician, you're never going to find him.
Yeah.
Trump's been good. Certainly much better than what we had before. And although I don't agree with stuff, and we could do a whole 4 hours on what I don't agree about with Trump, it's certainly better than it was before. And he's pushing forward the American experiment and the border secure. And there's a lot of good things happening. But I'm not trying to get overtly political, but what I am trying to say is I want people to start thinking about where they're putting their money. Like, who are you supporting? Are you supporting someone who hates your experiment, who hates the thing that you love, who hates what you want to do? Do you believe in your ability? Like, I believe in natural rights that pre-exist government. My ability to say and think freely and unabashedly without fear of repercussions for exercising my thoughts, my ability to protect myself and my family at the same limit that a government would, my ability to generate press or to express ideas freely through the market of ideas or through a free and unregulated press corps, which we don't have really anymore. All of these things are rights that, our founders, when they expressed them, said these aren't rights that come from government. These are rights that you naturally have the day you're born. And I'm interested in preserving those rights. And one of them is to go and chase whitetails like a crazy guy and provide food for my family and push this culture forward that I love in my heart of hearts. And the experiment that I'm running now is there's no difference between me and my customer segment. Like, the guys that I'm targeting, we're the same types of people. And the experiment that I'm running is if I can give them some technology that's going to help them at whatever level analysis that they want, and I'm going to do it and let them know that the money that they're paying me is going to go back in the company. It's going to go back into employing Americans. It's going to go back into making a product. It's going to go back into pushing forward this experiment that we all care about, that people will naturally gravitate towards that and want to see it happen. I could fail on this experiment. You know what I mean? Like, it could fail. It could, because a lot of times people will say they like building in America. They will say they like America First values. They will say they like freedom of press. They will say they like freedom of speech. They will say like the Second Amendment. They will say like hunting. They will say like primitive archery. But then when you look at where they put their money, it's not in those places. Like, they're going to buy the cheap shit from China. They don't think people should own guns, or they will just do things that are out of phase with how they perceive themselves in the world, which is a thing we all do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have an idea of who we are.
Yeah,
but then when you actually look at your actions.
Yeah, and then there's a hierarchy of what you feel is important and where you're willing to put your money or where your values are in certain things, for sure.
So the experiment that I'm running is I'm going to tell people that I'm an unabashedly patriotic American that believes in the American experiment, that believes that people will feel a great sense of gratitude and a full heart when they watch their family eating meat that they've gotten from their own efforts, and that they are healthy and free and wild Americans, and that is the type of company that I'm trying to build. And like I said, the day's young. We'll see if this works or not.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I'm here for the ride, Bill.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being along, and I don't know. I probably should have recorded our first phone call together, because apparently there's some pearls of wisdom there that I need to write down and reuse, because I don't convince everybody, but I try.
All right, so here's something before we get into the next segment of the podcast here, this episode. I have something that I've been really bad. I started doing this on some recent episodes in person, but I forgot to do. All right, are you a fan of the Sean Ryan show at all?
I mean, I've watched some episodes, yeah.
Have you watched it? Do you know what he does at the beginning of every episode?
Usually gives gifts, doesn't he?
I have a gift for you.
No, you don't.
I have a gift.
You have a gift for me?
I have a gift for you.
He's got a gift for me. My daughter's watching. He's got a gift for me. What is this gift? Now I feel bad.
So this is a Case Kinzu knife. Yes.
Dude, I was looking into these after you talked about these last time.
Yeah.
Because these are made in PA, right?
Yep. They're made in Bradford, Pennsylvania.
Wonderful.
Yep. Yeah, and I wanted to give that to you, and it's something as Case is a company that is a Pennsylvania company that's been around for a long time, that's been supporting of the hunting and fishing heritage and traditions of things, and I wanted to give that to you.
This is wonderful. Thank you, man. This is awesome.
Yeah,
I'm so jacked right now, because I think the last time we talked, you had one of these knives on you.
I did.
It's at the Mountain Buck Camp.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of them, and I was like, man, these things are nice. I want to get one of these. And you nailed it.
Yeah, so I wanted to give that to you.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've been looking for a good knife for a while. I've been, there's companies out there right now that, for one reason or another are really big. I'll use their knives and I'll be like, I can't get through dressing a single deer without this thing becoming a butter knife. Like, how does this happen? And I was looking at these ones when we were out in camp, and Johnny is the same thing, that they're awesome. And I love that they're made in PA. So now I feel bad because I didn't get you a gift.
This isn't something that is expected or reciprocal.
Well, I'm going to get you a gift next time.
You're letting me stay at your house, and you gave me White Claws.
I don't
know what to say.
I'm going to give you a free year of the Spartan Forge app.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
That's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to give you 2 free years. I'm not driving. I'm going to get him signed up here in a minute.
I can't wait. I'll give you my email. I'll give you my social security number as soon as we get out of here.
I don't need that, but I'll take it. I'll take a loan out in your name. Thank you very much. That's awesome. I'm stoked about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a good, I think they make fixed blades too as well, right?
Yeah, they do. So like the hunting knives, like the Ridgeback Hunter that I use is really nice, but that's your everyday carry EDC pocket knife that you're out.
And that's exactly what I've been looking for, is a good everyday carry, because I had a Benchmade and it snapped. The end of it snapped on me, and I was like, "What's going on with these knives?" And my like combat knife that I always carried was a Winkler, which were awesome knives, but they don't make like EDCs.
Yeah, like this is the one I have here. You can see there's some paint wore off because I've carried it every day in my pocket. I think this last year and a half or so that I've had this one.
I'm going to put this one through the paces.
Yeah, it's a good knife. I think you'll enjoy it. Yeah, no problem.
That's really awesome.
But I wanted to kind of kick that.
My first gift on a podcast, by the way.
Is it really?
My first gift on a podcast.
Well, look at that. Of course, that I'm the one that gave it to you.
Wonderful.
Because I'm your favorite.
You are my favorite.
Favorite Martonik, by the way.
Oh, 100%.
Just for everybody listening, my brother Kurt works for Bill at Spartan Forge.
Yeah, he's okay.
And he's decent, but he's not.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
But he's no Beau. Although my favorite, I'm sorry, I have to stand corrected. My favorite Martonik
is my dad.
Is your dad.
Yeah, I know. Okay, all right. I'll take second.
But you're a very close second.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't let Mason know where he falls into the whole mix. You know a lot of Martoniks at this point, so you got to be careful on how you speak.
Yeah, no, I know. They're a wily bunch.
But I kind of want to transition a little bit. So one thing about how we met and when we talked about that you were super interested in the way my dad talked about scrapes, which is something that you are very passionate about. And I would argue, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is one of your main things on how you hunt. We actually talked about at dinner, and you're like, I'm kind of a one-trick pony in the way that you hunt, but it works.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, and I should have mentioned this before, but I'll mention it now, is in probably 2014 or so, through public resources and other places, I started grabbing GPS data, and then I started working with universities and getting their GPS data. And some of the more like really wise or the people who are doing lots of great data were guys like Steve Dishkoff from Auburn, where they would have a layout of like, here's the hunting area, here are the stands, here's where the scrapes that we've mentioned are or we know about are. And other places where you get data, not only the GPS data, but what's on the ground. Or recently, in like the last few years, I've actually gotten to go into areas where I've had GPS data and walk around and kind of piece it together. And one of the things I see is, especially during the rut, bucks aren't always tending scrapes, but they're always walking past them, walking around them, going downwind of them. It's one of the few things where they'll always participate. There are some rules with bucks that I adopt or that I use. One of them being like, if you've got a big buck, there's almost always a water source within 1,000 yards. If you've got a big buck, you're going to find a water source. Whereas does, you can have does that'll be 2 miles off a water source, or they'll be maybe only seeps or something where they're getting water, or there's just not a ton of water. Bucks always seem to want water around. And there are other not hard and fast rules that I generally would say are good enough to build your plan around.
Mm-hmm.
What the rule that is always is there's going to be near scrapes, or they're going to be making scrapes. That no buck escapes that rule. They're always, whether they're making scrapes around their bedding area or there's different types of scrapes. I even have theories about scrapes that I think eventually might be published, or maybe I'll help Steve publish them. There are different types of scrapes. They all have different types of roles, whether it's communities that get used year-round, primary scrapes, secondary scrapes. I've even got like what I call competition scrapes. There's all these different types, and they always interact with them, and it's kind of like, a billboard or something where they interact with those no matter what. So that to me is like a denominator. It's like that is a part of the equation that I know is present. And so that to me, in my mind, when I'm accounting for variables or doing variable analysis, if that's something they will always do, because there are bucks that don't do a ton of rubbing, or they only do rubbing in certain areas and they leave their areas. They almost rub not at all during, the rut. Or there are really big bucks that make tiny little rubs, or really big, small bucks that make huge rubs. Or there's these other rules that are not as hard and fast, but scrapes are always present and scrapes are always getting used. And so that made sense to me to start building my hunting plan around that. And when I started figuring those types of things out, and then hearing you and your dad talk about it in the same way, or at least mentioning it in the same ways, thank you, love, mentioning it in the same ways that I was thinking about it, which was, I can account for this. I can visually see it. I can inspect them. Hell, even during the rut, you can smell when they're being used. Like there's a lot of contact points that you can build around to say it can be expected that up until the peak of the rut, there's going to be activity in and around these things.
And even then, there's, at least from my experience, you have way more analytical data, but even then they play a role in the overall deer communication.
And anyone can learn them in an hour. And you can show anyone, like people will walk throughout the woods their whole lives, non-deer hunters, and they'll walk past 10,000 scrapes, never know what they are. But then you explain it and you show someone one, like, here's the licking branch, here's where they cracked it, here's what they're doing with the tree, this is the path of the approach, this is why they're in here, this is why it's, you can teach somebody a lot of things about a scrape in a very small amount of time, and then it becomes a useful tool. So hearing your dad and you talk about those, and your dad seemingly, at least at the time when I was listening to him, looking at them in the same way that I did, that kind of reinforced my presuppositions about them. And like I said, 85, 90% of my deer, my bucks have been in and around scrapes, and I love it. It makes it easy for me.
Yeah, scrapes are one of those things that when I come across one in the woods, I'm always fascinated because, especially when you go into different regions, like you can learn your own areas and how scrapes are made, but they all have their own little bit of a different things to it. It was funny. I was in the woods with Nathan Killen yesterday, and someone I highly respect and regard as a whitetail hunter and a woodsman. And he's like, everyone says that they don't make scrapes on, it's only on flat ground. He's like, look at this. And we went to a spot that he had. There's some scrapes that were on a side hill. And it's like, a majority of the scrapes you find are on flatter ground, on a bench or whatever it might be. But you can have that. And I've come to the conclusion, and that's what I'm interested to hear you about, because there's areas I've been to where there's not as many rubs, or like you can find a lot of rubs in areas and almost no rubs in certain areas. Scrapes are somewhat consistent, but there are definitely areas that have more scrapes than non-scrapes. And I feel like a lot of it comes down to competition and that buck to doe ratio.
Yeah, precisely.
Was that what you feel like?
Yeah, exactly. The more competition that there is, the more signing has to take place in order to first suss out the dominance hierarchy among the bucks. But then secondly, and maybe more importantly, as you get closer to the rut, is advertise sexual dominance towards the rut, because one of the things that they do is they rub urinate over their tarsal glands onto the scrape, and they a lot of biologists that I respect say, and it's demonstratable, they've done it, but that the amount of testosterone present signals to a doe their ability to compete, to acquire food. The buck that's larger body-wise and has more testosterone has a predisposition to having dominance over food sources, best bedding areas, and that leads to larger antlers, which leads to ability to protect or fend off competing bucks. And that when they advertise that sexual selection positioning in the dominance hierarchy, does can sense that, and then they want to mate with bucks that have the better genes or have the better antlers or whatever it is. I can't speak for the does. They don't answer the questionnaires that I leave them, but they seem to, those bucks are, at the very minimum, they're able to drive out subordinate bucks. You know what I'm saying? I said ducks. Subordinate bucks. They're able to drive out. So a large buck is scraping an area. A smaller buck comes in. He's like, oh, this is a scrape I probably shouldn't be near. I'm going to get my butt kicked. Or the buck shows up and kicks her butt and kicks him out. And he maintains his scrape that's downwind of this doe bedding area. And then when those does come into estrus, he gets his opportunity to mate them. And he passes on his genes, and he's doing that because he's able to put on, the requisite amount of fat that he needs in order to run himself ragged during the rut. Because he's been able to put on all that fat and all those stores, so that when the time comes to the rut, he can run 20 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only do that if you're dominant enough to have the best food sources, the best bedding areas, and put the most fat and meat on your bone in order to compete when the time is right. And then you get to mate more. And they advertise those in the scrapes, and the does pick up on that. And then the bucks pick up on when the does start urinating and advertising that they're getting near estrus. Those bucks that are older and more dominant and have been around longer can pick up on that much better than younger bucks, which is why you see younger bucks in the road dying. You know, they're chasing 2 or 3 weeks earlier because this 1 or 2 year old deer has no idea what an estrus doe smells like, kind of like a 13-year-old boy has no idea what a woman looks like when she's interested in a guy. And those are the ones that you see dead in the road. And
that's why you hear, like, from a lot of people. I remember I'd go to work when I had a job where I'd go to work every day. I'd go in there and be like, people like, oh, Rut's early this year, saw some deer chasing, saw, 4-point chasing a doe. And it's like October 8th. It's like,
no. He smelled something he's never smelled before, and he won't leave her alone. That's what's going on. Meanwhile, the 6-year-old buck knows, no, she's not ready yet.
Yeah.
And he's peeling off and doing his own thing. And he's continuing eating acorns and forage and getting his fat stores ready for when the actual rut hits, and he needs to be on his feet 22 hours a day, 20 hours a day. Yep. And also know that by the time that competition is over, he still needs to have enough fat to make it through the winter.
Yep.
And the younger ones who start chasing October 8th and running themselves ragged and, wet-faced and looking all crazy October 21st, they've taken themselves out of the race before it's even started because that doe's not standing.
Yeah.
And so the does know that, the bucks know that, and all of that advertising happens through the scrape. All of that happens at the scrape. It's that billboard. It's like, the advertisement for the business, like, we're selling this or that or whatever. And it's worked for me. I mean, like I said, 85-90% of my bucks have been over scrapes or near scrapes. And depending on the amount of pressure in the area, I change my setup. If it's a lower pressured area, I might be sitting right on the scrape, 15, 20 yards off the scrape. If it's a highly pressured area, then I know what the predominant wind is, and I look for smaller trails that are off of that might not be obvious, and I'm sitting those trails, and I might be 40, 50, 60 yards away from the scrape, and I'm just waiting for the one time that buck is coming through that area on October 25th and trying to scent check that scrape for the first hot doe. And you might only get one shot on that buck. You might only be coming through that area once or twice. But that's the gamble. And that's, again, the beauty of it is, like, that variable analysis and betting on yourself and saying, I've done the requisite amount of research and I've scouted the area and I've put the boots in the ground and I've put the cameras out and I've glassed and I've looked around and done all of the homework necessary for that one moment of truth. Because the fickle thing about hunting is you're a stupid phone game away from a great season or an awful season.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you've done all the homework and you're sitting up there playing Block Blast or whatever the game is on your phone, and that buck comes by and you're like, oh my God, I did all this work. And I was sitting here scrolling Instagram. It happened to me, it was last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago, I think.
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I was sitting on my phone freaking scrolling Instagram, and sitting there, and I look up, and here comes, and I was like, oh, and I was like trying to grunt and like bring them back, and everything is like, that's the difference between all of that work.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, it's like you're investing in yourself, right? Like, you do the work in the preseason, you're out there scouting, you're out there running cameras, you're out there doing the research, you're doing all the online stuff, you're digital scouting, you're getting on the ground, you're dropping pins, you're doing all of that, and then you get on the tree stand and you scroll Instagram. What kind of idiot are you? I've done it, and I did it 2 years ago. Like, crazy, insane.
Yeah.
Pure insanity.
Well, yeah, and 100%. So, like, one thing you brought up multiple times during that first discussion on scrapes is the different types of them. You've studied scrapes from the standpoint of a hunter, from someone that's researched them, looking at data, whether it's GPS collar data, whether it's looking at your own data, anything else. Like, what are some different types of scrapes that that you see and that you pay attention to?
I'll break down the 4 major types that I've seen, or that how I categorize them, and this could be wrong, but I always use the word heuristics, and a heuristic is basically a good enough way to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is it works for me.
Yep.
And so that's the classification method that I use for it. So these scrapes might be a heuristic, and an academic might hear what I have to say and be like, that guy's an idiot. That's fine. It's worked for me, you know.
Yeah.
I've got 20, 25 mounts on the wall. I'm 42 years old. I'm doing okay. And I'm not the best hunter in the world. Like I said to you earlier when you were talking privately, I might grade myself as like a C+. Especially when I start hanging out with like your dad or the Nathan Killins or like other guys. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so like, they're here and I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, so, but it's served me well. So here are the 4 things that I think about. There's primary, secondary, community, and then competition. And I'll define them all separately. So primary scrapes are scrapes that are along primary travel routes. So a buck's leaving a bedding area. He's laying down sexual selection sign. He's getting your doe bedding areas. And he's got the scrape on the ground. And then there's a overhead licking branch. Usually it's chewed up. And even better is if there's a few branches that are chewed up. And then even better than that is there's some that are higher. Even though smaller bucks can get up on their haunches and do it, they don't do it as often. But if you have a lot of licking branches, and then the other thing I look for with the primary is that there's a large branch that's been bitten, and not just like a small one. Like when you see like a index finger or bigger, some index fingers are bigger than others.
Yeah.
But if you got an index finger or bigger branch that's snapped, so I like to assume that that's a bigger buck. Could be wrong. Who knows? It's a heuristic that I use. I see those primary scrapes, I note them, and I map them in my area, and I kind of look at them and say, with all of these lines of these primary scrapes, what's the origination point? And then I'll kind of walk that back and say, where can I assume that there's bedding, where this buck's leaving and making these lines of scrapes, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those primary scrapes. And then I'll get in and look for bedding. And then from the bedding, I'm saying now, is there doe bedding? Is there buck bedding? And there's different ways that I define those things, but when we can get into that later if you want to. Primary scrapes, that's primary scrapes. Secondary scrapes are a buck's running through the woods. He's got nerves to scrape, kind of like a itch, like he's just got to itch it. He lays a scrape down, and a week later it's full of leaves, right?
Testosterone driven.
Yeah,
almost.
testosterone driven. It's almost like, I almost look at it as like a tick. Like they just got to do it. They got to get it out of their system, and then they move on. They're not strategically placed. It's not because they're leaving bedding. It's not because it's near a doe bedding area. It's not because it's just they're walking through the woods. It might be 2 a.m.
Yeah, you don't know if it's day or night.
Yeah, it might be 2 a.m. They're just dropping a scrape. There's usually not a licking branch with those. There's usually not a rhyme or reason. And if you plot those, you're just going to have a block of woods full. Especially come like October 15th to like November 15th, there'll be no rhyme or reason, and I don't pay attention to them. And they're usually, for me, they're smaller.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason other than a buck did this at some point, and I almost totally disregard those secondary scrapes. The third one, and it's one that I really like to focus on, is community scrapes. Community scrapes get used throughout the year. They're usually larger, depending on where you are in the U.S. They might be from anything from a manhole cover size to the size of a car hood. And they'll usually have multiple licking branches. And they'll also, when you drop a pin on them and then you kind of take a macro look at them, you can kind of see how there are many paths that lead to them.
Yep.
It might be that there's a hedgerow, there could be a ridge, it could be a ridge and a hedgerow come together, and some other things come together. It could be the inside corner of a field if you're in the Midwest. It could be a multitude of reasons. Lots of good security cover. It's really thick around them. And then one that I really love in like the PA areas or like the Western Maryland areas is where you've got a lot of thick. And then in the middle, there'll be like some tree space.
So yeah,
and then there's just something laid down there. And it's just, all that is that they're comfortable going there. It'll get used year round. You drop a camera on it, you'll see bucks using it in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, all the way through the year. And you'll see does working them. A lot of times all those community scrapes, you'll see does using them during the peak of the rut when they haven't been mated, especially if they're standing. And what I mean by standing is they're ready to mate. Like they're actually ready to mate and they haven't identified a buck, or a buck hasn't found them, or the buck to doe ratio is really low. So the buck is in, or the doe is in heat and she's not being mated. They'll go and wait in those scrapes, and it's very rare. I've only seen it twice in my life, but I've seen a doe walk into them and bleat. Like just meh, meh. I can't do the noise, but they'll stand in them and make that noise. And they're basically saying like, I've got another 24 hours that I can get pregnant. Come and get the job done. Like, I don't care who you are, right? It's like 2:30 a.m. at the bar somewhere. And it's just like, this has to happen.
Yeah.
And the community scrape. So larger, used year round. And people I'm sure have heard this many times before, but you asked me to categorize them. So
No. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And then the last one, and I think the most esoteric one, or the one that's not really well understood, is what I call a competition scrape. And this is something that I've learned from the GPS data, and I've talked to Steve Ditchkoff about, I've talked to other biologists about. And essentially what's happening is you have bucks that have just peeled, and we're talking September 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th week of September into very early October. You'll have an area, and when you look at it on a map, there'll be an area where there are favorable bedding areas all around. Mm-hmm. And there might be, say you have like a ridge with 4 fingers coming off of it, and each one of those fingers have an area that's favorable bedding for a buck where he can, maybe it's leeward, he can look down, he can smell what's behind him, there's food, there's cover, there's water. And then at the tops of those fingers will be like where bucks walk across at night, and then they drop down in the morning to go and bed on.
Yeah, so where they move, how am I trying to put this? Where they move, there's the up and down movement, and then the side to side. Like when you look at a ridge point, those types move.
Exactly.
I'm losing my train of thought on what that actually is.
But in between them, what you'll find is there'll be scrapes at the top.
Yeah.
Or like in between them. And it's too early for mating. There's no reason to be advertising sexual selection or dominance in a hierarchy. And what I think is going on is they're letting the other bucks know in the area, like, hey, I'm bedding over here on this point. Leave me the hell alone. Like, I've just peeled. Testosterone's up. I'm no longer tolerating other bucks. I'm not here to lick your ear. I just want to be left the hell alone, kind of like a guy's testosterone goes up. So I'm going to drop this scrape here at the top. And if you walk near this, know that Hal is on this ridge. Yep. You need to leave Hal the hell alone. And those will get abandoned come like October. I'm talking PA or Maryland or Virginia. In North Dakota, it would be different. But around here, those get abandoned around the first week of October.
Yeah, like sometimes even earlier.
Yeah, they'll be getting worked really early.
Yep.
And when you drop a camera on them, you'll see just bucks. All you'll see is bucks, and they'll be late night bucks. You won't see daytime bucks. But what's important about recognizing those competition scrapes is they're just, I think, again, I'm not a biologist. I'm just heuristics. I think it's the bucks letting each other know who's who in the zoo, who's going where and who's doing what. And just, this is my area, stay out of it or whatever. And once the does start getting even smelling differently, then those ones get abandoned. But for really good early season spots, you shouldn't hunt them. Do not hunt the competition scrapes is what I would say. But what I would say is allow them to be an indicator for where there could be bedding. And if you are trying to get something done early season, like say you're, for me at Virginia, I hunt September, October. I look for those competition scrapes or look for those scrapes that set up like that. And then now I'm like, where's the bedding that's near this?
Yep.
And then I'll go set up in and around bedding. And I get really aggressive. Like once I've put my third doe on the ground, I'll hunt beds, second week of October through second week of October, or I'm sorry, second, third week of September through second week of October. I'll do a lot of bed hunting.
Yep.
I'll try to get into beds and identify the beds that I want to hunt based on those competition scrapes. Again, those will be totally abandoned come late September or even earlier, depending on where you are. Once the bucks really start to not tolerate each other, they show up, and then once the does even start to smell a little bit different, they'll stop messing with them. But they're a good early season indicator to understand where bucks are and what they're doing, and that's what I use them for. So I think I covered all 4.
Yeah.
And really the ones that I focus on, to answer your question, are primary and community scrapes come, early to late October and November. And then right towards, and we put them in the app, but when you get to the date where it's like super, super like peak of breeding, or, you can expect that the most does are in estrus, then I will abandon scrape hunting. Like, I'm not focused on scrapes. Now I'm focused on funnels and travel routes in between all of these areas. But it's still important to know where those scrapes are.
Yep.
Because if you got 50 on this hillside and 50 on this hillside, now how does a buck who wants to scent check all of those get in between those two areas? And then I'll just sit those areas.
Yeah, and I also think that bucks will still use those, and a lot of times some of those scrapes are put in funnels.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Where multiple trails are connecting, whether it's a terrain feature, a vegetation feature, or something that causes a trail connection point that will create some
context
of those
is very important.
Yes,
on those, right?
And that's where, like, I'm not. When people say, "Oh, scrapes aren't important during the rut," and not say you didn't say that, Bill,
which scrapes?
But like, it's like what scrapes? Like,
what scrapes are we
there
talking
are
about?
scrapes that I hunt end of October that I don't hunt during the peak of the rut, but there's also scrapes that I will hunt both of those depending on how they set up and what they, how they particularly look like. But I think what you said about the primary scrapes and community scrapes, which for me, I interchangeably use those terms, probably incorrectly sometimes, but I think of, like, when I find those big scrapes that are used year after year that I go through them, I call them all, honestly, I say community and primary scrape almost as if they're the same thing.
Yeah, I can make a distinction between the two if you'd like me to.
Yeah. They'll give a little bit of a distinction.
So
what I picked up on the distinction from what you said was, like, primary is a lot more travel areas where community is more bedding, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, but also community get used year round.
Okay.
There are primary scrapes that will be abandoned and that will not be used during the rut.
Okay.
Or after the rut. But the other one will be primary scrapes near doe bedding will just be, your manhole size covered scrape with a licking branch over top. Mm-hmm. That will be near doe bedding.
Yep.
That's not necessarily a community scrape.
Yep.
Because they will be abandoned. And the way that you can tell that they're abandoned is the leaves start gathering in them. So I'll have cameras on scrapes, and I'll be able to tell, like, when the peak of rutting is happening, like when the most does are getting bred, those primary scrapes will get filled in with leaves. And then like, oh, it's November 4th, and I have a scrape that's had activity all year long, and now it's got leaves in it. We're at the peak of breeding.
Yep.
Does are being bred. Still a good time to hunt. You just have to shift the way that you hunt. And then when those scrapes get opened up again, that means we're right after the peak of breeding. And now those bucks are looking for the does that weren't bred. And now they're back to advertising their sexual selectiveness. And now they're reopening scrapes. And now it can become a good time again. In fact, a really great time to start hunting scrapes. But once you start seeing those scrapes, if you have cameras on scrapes, they start getting filled in with leaves. And it's November 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Now the majority of the bucks are on does. They don't care about scrapes anymore. There are does everywhere.
Yep.
They're in their heat. They don't care anymore.
They're not needing to check them to try to find a doe.
No, they're on the does. They're everywhere.
Yep.
But the community scrapes will still be getting tended. That'll be happening at night, but they'll still be getting tended. But also the community scrapes, in my mind, or the way that I use this term, is they're getting worked all year around. Those primary scrapes that are on travel routes or near bedding will get abandoned come December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. But those community scrapes will always be open.
Yep.
And there aren't many. Like, when you find a good community scrape that's really large, or sometimes it won't be just like a big car-sized hood. It'll be an area where there's 7 or 8 scrapes in, like, something like the size of this yard. Like, like a quarter square acre, there'll be 7 or 8 scrapes. That is just like an area that's favorable for scraping, but you should treat it the same way that you would treat a community scrape. It's a place where deer are safe. They feel good. They're here all year round. They're working it throughout the year. And so the primary difference to me between a primary and a community scrape is there off-season working, and is it abandoned after the primary rutting activity is over?
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And like when I look at, I guess it depends on the situation, whether they're the community or primary scrapes, but scrapes that are around bedding, that I shift from like focusing on buck bedding scrapes, depending on the weather, depending on the year, but typically around the 14th, 15th of October, to more doe bedding oriented scrapes. Like you get a cold front.
Those are my bread and butter.
Yeah.
Those are my bread and butter.
I think they're most people's, and whether they want to admit it or not, when you spend the most time in the woods, or when a lot of people spend most time in the woods, is late October into November, which is the rut time frame. So what, Johnny and I have talked about this quite a bit, is like we focus so much on bucks, but there's so much that comes around those does, and understanding those does to shoot those bucks that you're trying to be able to figure out.
Yeah, and that's a big one for me is when I've identified doe bedding areas and then finding out where the scrapes are near those doe bedding areas, those are for me like that. I almost exclusively shift to those around mid-October through December 15th. I'm around those all the time because there's always going to be that buck that's looking for the one doe that hasn't been mated, the one doe that hasn't, got into heat. And you can just keep shifting on them, but the key to that is understanding where the does are bedding.
Yeah, and does are so random at times.
Oh my God,
it's so
frustrating.
For me, like when I go through how I mark doe bedding for the most part, there's many times that I want to make this very clear that it's very difficult sometimes for me to distinguish the difference between buck and doe bedding at times.
Sure,
you'll get in place, and a lot of times they are intermingled to a point where does might not be that far apart. It's not like there's, buck gets out here a quarter mile and there's a group of does back here and you find that singular bed on the point and the does are back here. It's not always that clear.
No, for sure.
And I think like during the scouting camp, we came across that many times. And I think, and the reason why I'm talking about this so definitive is the standpoint that it was brought up, and I realized that was something that I haven't explained well in the past, is the fact that sometimes you don't know exactly how that's laid out, and sometimes they do intermingle more than you think, and sometimes the same deer, doe and bucks, will use the same bed.
Yeah,
Did you see that in the GPS collar data at all?
Yes, for sure. And they'll satellite what I saw, especially with bucks, come like October 15th, is they'll satellite bed off of doe groups in places where you don't think they would or that don't make sense because they're simply trying to be down one of the does.
Yep.
It's like they feel good that they're near does, and it's like, oh, the second Betty comes into estrus, I'm going to be ready. So I'm going to be 45 yards downwind, right off this open hillside where you wouldn't think there'd be a self-respecting buck in the world. and when you get there and you check it out, it's like and I've done this. I did it in North Carolina, near Moyock, North Carolina, where I had a ton of GPS data. It'll just be like a singular bed on the side of a down log in what is otherwise a totally open area where you'd never assume there is a buck, but there's a ridge above him where does are constantly, and he just wants to be in their vicinity in the off chance that just like a doe comes into heat.
Yeah, and also as using them as an alarm system.
Yeah, that too.
Where, people coming across the top of a ridge, they bump a bunch of does, like, I'll bump some does. No big deal, but they run off,
and you
kick
have no
the buck
idea
off,
what's with
and
them.
You'll never see.
Never know. Yeah.
You don't know, maybe there wasn't a buck down there, or maybe there was the buck that you were chasing that's down there. That's,
a good amount of the time, if it's October 15th or later, where we're talking Eastern Seaboard, and what I'm saying is 2 to 3 weeks off the primary when the majority of does come into heat,
Yep.
whether you're in Florida or wherever it is, whatever that date is, go back 2 to 3 weeks. You'll see bucks bedding in areas near those does where they would never otherwise be for $1 million. Like you'd never be able to get them there.
Yep.
But they'll be just off them hanging out because they're just waiting for the first opportunity. You have to think about these bucks like you think about yourself when you're 14 and you discovered girls. Like I will do anything to get in a room with a woman right now. Like I'll go to a dance, I'll dress like an asshole, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to be in and around women. You know what I mean? And that's how these bucks are. When the testosterone hits and it's through the ceiling, it's just like, whatever I got to do. I will bed on the most godforsaken hill where where anybody can see me from a mile, and I'm just going to stay still and wait. And they'll do that. Like I've seen bucks that wait in ditches to cross a road to get to the other side of the road just to be near does. And you see that, and you're like, what is going on here? Like I'm in a deer zoo. It's like, no. You've seen the one buck that caught a scent of a doe that's almost into estrus, and he just needs to be near her until she is ready to stand and mate. And he's willing to roll the dice. And I get really aggressive with those primary and community scrape setups. When I know that there are doe bedding near it, I'll get very aggressive on those. And even if I spook deer out when I'm going in the morning, I don't give a shit. I'll sit the scrape all day long, or I'll sit down the scrape. And like I said, the other thing, in heavily pressured areas, especially public, and for the public hunters who are listening, I will look for, if I find doe bedding, where I know does commensurately bed, and then I see any thick cover near it, and then I see a scrape, I will get up in a tree from that scrape and say, now, where is cover that's 60 to 100 yards off, where if I'll look at my app, and you can use other apps, it doesn't matter. If the primary wind in this area is a southwest wind during the rut, I'll get to where I know this primary scrape is and where this doe bedding is, and I'll get up in a tree and I'll look southwest, or I'll look on an app, on my app, southwest. Where's the next bit of cover that's 50, 25, 100 yards off from this scrape, so that if I know 60% of the time it's going to be a south or southwest wind in November, or a north-northwest wind, what does that security cover give a buck ability to do? It gives them the ability to, during daylight hours, walk near that scrape without ever tending it. He'll never tend it. He just wants to smell it. And then I'll get in there and there'll just be a faint little trail. Like barely used. And now I say, with that southwest wind in mind, I need to get downwind of that trail. And that's where the insanity comes into play, because now the question becomes, are you willing to sit that for 10 days and not see anything and look at bucks and does that are 200 yards away where you can see them all day? Are you willing to sit here and wait for that one buck to come through? And if you are, you will get the one opportunity in a 10-day sit. You will get it. If that cover is there and it's nowhere else, and it butts up to other cover or water or whatever, you will get that chance. But the question becomes, are you insane enough to wait 5, 6, 7, 8 days for that one opportunity, and you're willing to stay as frosty as it takes to wait, and then you'll get that shot, and then you make your season. Your season's made. Yeah,
and the thing is, I feel like what you just said there is something that most people, including myself, don't want to hear at times. Of
I know it.
That you have to put that time in
and have confidence in the setup.
On top of it, when I was doing that interview with Alan Altizer the other day, he's like, whitetail hunting is very simple. He's like, do the basics well and put the time in.
Like everything.
It's literally like everything.
Like everything in life.
And we're talking about these things, and all these little minute things are important. But when it comes down to it, it's like doing those basics good and doing them often, especially when you come to areas of big woods, mountains, places that these deer aren't on traditional patterns of bed to food in particular locations, and where they can bed down. As Johnny says, sometimes they're just wandering around and they just lay down, and they have, multiple good spots they feel confident in based on those wind directions or whatever else might be. But the thing that you brought up about cover, I think is is so important. And cover is something, and I want to bring this up too because it's important. I've learned this even from doing the scouting camp. We've had, instructors that have come in from different areas, and what they consider thick cover compared to others are different. And deer, depending on the areas, in my experience, cover is relative to those areas.
Yep, for sure.
Something could have thick cover everywhere and be different than an area that's mature timber, open woods, and then all of a sudden you have a brush of green briars over there. Okay, that's a significant amount of cover. And then you get to a 5-year-old clear cut somewhere, and it's like that's everywhere. It's like there's different amounts of what's significance when it comes to cover. But I've always made it a rule. I shouldn't say a rule. Rule's pretty
stringent.
That's pretty stringent, but a guideline that I follow a lot of times is I want to be able to shoot into the cover that's nearest to that scrape when I'm hunting scrapes.
Yep.
And an example of last year, a couple years ago, I was hunting a scrape. I've known about the scrape for almost 10 years. I've trail camera data on it. I know when it gets good. And for a while, I was hunting based on the wind. I was hunting out into the open area, looking back to where the scrape was and then thick behind it. But what I was running the issues with is these deer that wouldn't hit the scrape particularly. They might only be 10, 15 yards behind it, but they'd come along, they could scent check it and stay in that thick cover. So this past year, I moved. It was actually 60 yards away from the scrape, but the trails that led to it would either lead to the scrape or just behind it. And the way the wind would blow, it could be off of it and be just off enough where it could be good. And I had more activity and encounters than I did when I was hunting over that scrape, but that was that particular situation.
Yep.
And then there's other times when I've hunted places that were, say in a hub or something, you get a really good scrape where I could sit and that scrape's at 18 yards. I'm ready to shoot it. And it being a good spot based on the terrain, everything that those deer have to funnel through there to be able to wind it.
Well, and that's understanding the context and the surrounding factors. One of the things with scrapes that you're talking about that are in those funnel areas like that is if you have a really good thermal pull, right, where it doesn't matter that you're in. So some areas where there's a scrape and there's not a lot of thermal pull, then the wind becomes much more important because those deer are smelling you before they ever show up to that scrape. In other words, they know that you're in that area. But when you're sitting in an area where you either have a creek that's doing like late day thermal pull, or you have a hub where you have like 9:30 a.m. solar thermal pull where your scent's being lifted out of there, those types of scrapes, and I know you and I have talked about this going back many years, I might not get into those stands until 9 a.m.
Yep.
Because I do not want to get in there until the thermal pulls up. And at that point, the bucks, they don't have a concept pragmatically about the hunter who's waiting until 9:15 to get in there and get up in a tree, and now the thermal pull is pulling my scent out. So now I will sit over a scrape in those types of areas because they're never going to, unless they cross my scent stream where I came in, they're going to never know I'm there because either the creek or the beaver dam or the sun is pulling my scent way out of there.
Yep.
And you only know that, and the way that I've learned that is getting in there in March and saying, all right, I go back in the Spartan Forge app or my Pilot app or whatever it is, and here's the normal weather in this area in November. Now, I'm waiting for those circumstances in March. So if the normal area at, X, Y, or Z spot near Pittsburgh or whatever you're hunting is 34 degrees, southwest wind, cloud covers here, and it's a partly cloudy to sunny day or whatever, I will look for that day in March and go in there with milkweed and sit and get over that scrape and look at what my milkweed's doing on the side of a mountain, side of a hill, sunlight, whatever, and say, here's what the milkweed's doing. And now I can note that in my journal or notes. You can write it in your phone. You can text it to yourself. Doesn't matter what it is. And then when those things present themselves come November, all right, I need to wait till 9:10, 9:15, 9:20 because that's when there's been enough thermal generation that now my scent's being lifted out. I need to make sure that's under 5 mile an hour of wind, because if it's over that, it's going to beat the thermals down and it's going to kill my scent anyway. So now I'm waiting for that one day, and I'm leaving that area alone so the bucks aren't on high alert. I get in there, and it's just those are the stands where it's like, I've got this 2-day period.
Yep.
And if it's not right, it's not right. I need to get out. But then I go to these other spots, and that's the importance of having many spots scouted and set aside so that you don't have to force yourself into a bad position where you're, and I've done it, I still do it, where it's like, I shouldn't be here anymore.
Yep.
But it just feels too good. There's too many things going on, and I'm disregarding myself, and that's where discipline comes in.
Yeah, but there is an element of acceptable risk when it comes to those things, because things are never going to be totally consistent, or you're never going to be able to completely predict what the wind's doing, what the thermals are going to do, and all of that.
And that's the gamble. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while, old Mr. Big comes in and makes a mistake.
Every once in a while, it works out in your favor.
Or, like, the unexplainable is, and I've had this happen a couple times, and it's not something you should rely on. I've had a buck come in on a string on the path I walked in on. And I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, this makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll come right up my scent stream. And he doesn't care because there's a scrape where a doe just hit or whatever. And he's thinking, I don't care.
Yep.
There's a doe in here. Guess what? I haven't had any love. I found the one. She's in here somewhere. I'm walking right up, and I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, it happened to Johnny was telling me a story last year where it happened with Pete, where the creek that they took in, or the cut or whatever it was that they took in, Pete kept telling him, like, I think there's a buck over there.
Yeah.
And Johnny was like, no, dude, that's where we walked. Like, there's no buck there. And he kept telling him, and finally, buck, like 140, poked his head out. It was sitting right where they walked in.
Yep.
So, when it's the time's right, the time's right.
Yeah, and in that situation, because Johnny's told it many times, but, like, he didn't believe Pete because his thermals were falling right into that
right into
spot.
where that spot was.
And you don't know, maybe out of happenstance, out of luck, it just was just drifting past that deer. Maybe he was still curious. You don't know.
Or he just doesn't care.
Yeah, and you don't know. And there's an element of risk and
everything.
And again, acceptable risk or calculated risk that's involved with that a little bit.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, but just overall, man, like I think scrapes can play such a huge role in what you're trying to do and how you're trying to hunt, because they are that communication tool. They're that hub, and depending on the type of scrape that you find, and like I want to also encourage people not to get discouraged when they come in and find a scrape and they're not sure what it is. But think about those things. Okay, is this close to bedding? Does this have security cover on it? Does it have multiple years of licking branches that are broke off on it? What's the size of the scrape underneath the tree? All those things are like a combination where you get a score. Yeah. Like it's not you look at like, oh, that's got a big licking branch, that's an A+, or that's got a cart hood size scrape underneath, that's an A+. No, it's a combination of these different features that builds that score up.
Yep, and it's context, and then there's also, and I'll say for all of the stuff that I say about variable analysis, context, studying the past, and all that stuff, there's also a lot to be said for just trusting your gut.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a little caveman in you that's been hunting for 100,000 years, and sometimes he gets his voice.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, dude, the wind's bad, you need to stick it out.
Yeah.
And that happened. Johnny and I went hunting last year or 2 years ago, and we went into a spot, and I told, like, he said in his video, and we talked about it, I was like, dude, my little caveman right now is going nuts. We're killing this morning.
Yep.
Like, my inner beast is telling me there are deer everywhere. And sure enough, an hour later, we were just covered in rut activity.
Yep.
And they're all over the place. And that is the best. That to me is just, when you're in those mornings where the woods are just on fire and it's just happening all around you and the bucks are going nuts and the does are crazy and nothing can go wrong. Like, oh man, I live for those moments.
Yeah, Johnny's talked about that hunts a lot of times. And he talked about like your confidence and feeling it of like, I feel like this is gonna happen.
This is gonna happen.
Yeah, and man, that's a tough one to measure for people. Of like, I know there's times when I'm not sure, especially when you're like day 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of like getting into a hunt during the rut, and you start to lose that confidence, even though maybe you should have it. But like for me, number one is that gut check, and 2 is laying out the pros and cons of the spot. It's like, all right, what are and if you can do that, you can detach yourself from the emotional side of it and focus on like, what are the facts that are presented to me here? Why am I sitting here? Why should I continue to sit here? And not letting the emotional side of like, well, I haven't seen a buck in 4 days here.
Your grass is always
maybe
greener.
I should move. That's not always the case, you know.
No, especially in the big woods.
Yeah,
because that buck might just be coming by one time to check an area and then come through. And if you've done your homework and you know the score, then it's a waiting game.
Yeah. I know when we were scouting with Nathan, he had this spot. It was just like, I said this on that podcast too, but I get jealous of other people's spots. I always think they're way better than mine, and I look at them, and I'm like,
because you haven't had to sit them.
Yeah. That's exactly right. But you look at it, it's like, man, this just seems like the best spot you could potentially be in. And he's like, well, if I can get in here clean and I can sit enough days. He's like, that buck I'm chasing is going to come by here during the season. And he said it to me, we were walking up the hill. He goes, it just depends on whether I'm in that tree or not.
Yep.
And it's like, man, that is such a good way of.
It's 100% true.
And it is. And I've said this many times. Me and my dad talked about it. Like, there's so many times, whether it's a particular scrape or a spot, that if I sat there every day of the season and hypothetically I didn't get busted going in, going out, something that was screwed up, I would have an opportunity at the buck I'm chasing if I sat that spot.
Yep.
But
I have to psych myself up, dude. Like, you came to one of my spots a few years back when you were helping me track a deer that I shot there. And my calculus was, am I willing to walk the 3 miles in here the correct way every day and sit every day? And that was my 4th day of seeing nothing.
Yep.
When I shot that buck on there was an acorn flat up on the middle of a knob in the middle of nowhere. There was an easy way to get in there, but the easy way to get in there would let every deer in the woods know that you were there.
Yep.
It was like, am I committed enough? So for me, it's just like, I got to watch some, like, you know, old hunting videos of mine or look at some deer on the wall. I got to rip some Fred Bear listen to some Nuge on the way in the morning, get hyped up, remind myself why I love this so much, and then take the long route in. And if it doesn't happen, take comfort in the fact that you attacked it as hard as you could and you did what you could and you left it all out there. But don't quit because you're not seeing what you think you should see, because no one's entitled to anything when you get in there.
Yeah, that's a extremely good point. And no matter what, when you go into a spot, when you go into an area, you're not entitled to what those results are.
Nope.
It's putting in that time and having that confidence in it. And sometimes gaining that confidence takes making mistakes and just being in there to be able to do it.
Yep, for sure.
But Bill, I appreciate one for you inviting me here to come to your house and being able to talk, but also your in-depth scientific approach to looking at whitetails and your curiosity, I guess I'll put it as, to wanting to learn more, whether it's from GPS collar data, from hunting yourself, doing those things to be able to pick up on it. I really do appreciate it. I think it helps a lot of people out.
Yeah, and I'll say the same to you. Like, your podcasts early on were like a good reminder to me that I'm not the only insane guy in the world that's willing to go, find himself in 10,000 acres of woods and act like a crazy person.
Yeah.
It's the good thing about places like that are the difficulty. You can look at the difficulty and the amount of work that it takes is like the low point, but those low points make the high points so much higher.
Yeah.
Because when you put it together and it happens, like if someone just walks you out and says, oh, there's 150-inch deer in here every day, there's a fence, they're going to show up to the corn. And if that's your thing, if you're a high-powered lawyer, you don't have the time to do the scouting and the research and you just want to go put a deer in the ground, more power to you. Move the culture forward. Like, I don't care. I don't judge people how they do that stuff. But, you know, the sweet's not as sweet without the sour.
Yep.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Well, I appreciate you coming on, like I said. And Bill, so everyone go follow Spartan Forge on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all the above there. Check out the Spartan Forge app. You can check that out. You get a 14-day free trial, and if you use the code East Meets West, you get 20% off. And if you don't like it, cancel the son of a bitch. Get rid of it.
Get rid of it.
We don't need it. But check it out. I bet that if you would play around with it, give it the chance that it needs, it's going to be a little bit different than other apps that you've used, but give it a chance, and I think you'll be satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't looked at it in the last year or two either, like the amount of UAV that we've updated, the changes that we've made to the app, it's a much more solid app. The features that we offer, you can try it for free. There's also a free version of the app, the UAV, the LiDAR, the Blue Force tracker, the historical weather data. Like, it's all there. Like, all you got to do is check it out, and I answer all of the critiques and the praises on social media. I make sure to answer personally. So if you have a feature that you want in the app or something you don't like or something you have a question about, message us on the Spartan.Forge on Instagram. Say this question's for Bill, and you'll get an answer from me. And I consider it a pleasure, a responsibility as the CEO to make sure that I'm answering all of the praises and the gripes that we get from everyone in the community. And this app has been built for you guys, and I owe it to you to give you the answers. So if you're going to take the time to tell me what you like or you don't like, you're going to get an answer from me, and I look forward to talking to those people.
Yeah, 100%. But all right, Bill.
All right, Beau.
I appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.